Chapter 4, Ice Cream Scoop. As he stepped off the autobus, Lon pulled the brim of his hat down so he wouldn't see the pale sage late afternoon sky. Stupid sky, he thought. Stupid vast universe, trying to crush me. He turned toward the crowd in front of the Rhinology building, and a woman in a dark red pantsuit, holding a portable, bumped into him, knocking him back a few steps. "Oh dear," said the woman, a rasp in her voice that made him wonder if she smoked. Who smokes anymore? "I'm so sorry. I was distracted by my phone. Are you okay?" He glanced aside to avoid her gaze. His pulse stuttered, and he moved his right hand behind his back to hide its shaking. I'm okay." "Really?" He could tell she was concerned about his odd behavior, and he attempted a smile. Really?" She considered him for a moment more, then looked back at her portable. "Well, if you say so. I'm late anyway. Sorry again." The woman moved on, and Lon drew a deep breath, flexing his cramping hand. Did I sound stupid? No, it was fine. No big deal. Everything is fine. But as he turned back to the crowd, everything was not fine. "We've got a gigantus problem, essay," said Lucia in his ear. "You mean," sub-vocalized Lon, lips moving slightly with no audible sound, "that sea of people?" Hundreds of people crowded behind police barricades, shifting to get a look, drawn to the curiosity of the disaster. Of course, streams of humans always flowed through the city, even in the middle of the night, ever since the stars disappeared and scientists tried to compensate, but ended up creating a night sky with a teal twilight glow. But Lon had not expected so many people. The noises and sounds of the assembled masses threatened to crash down on him like waves of the ocean and drag him under. With a shuddering gasp, he backed away to give himself some space to come up for air. "This is stupid," he thought. "What am I doing here?" The top of the building towered over the crowd, bits of damage visible, and he looked at it longingly, an ache in his chest. From where he stood, shorter than many in the crowd, he couldn't see much. But the building was so close. Answers were so close. He wished, not for the first time, for a little bit of magic. Any power. If he could fly, he'd zoom above the crowds and land on top of the Rhinology building. Have a pleasant look around. Or, better yet, invisibility. He could sneak through the people and get right inside the scene and stay and investigate as long as he wanted, with no worry he might have an episode in front of everyone. Invisibility would be useful for so many things. But magic wasn't real. All he had was his urban camo, not nearly powerful enough for the situation. The teeming mass of humans seemed impassable, with no way through to see the building. Lon turned away from the crowd and closed his eyes in frustration. "Nah, I didn't mean the sea of people," said Lucia through the ear cuff. "We have something worse to deal with." "Worse? I can't..." He trailed off, gasping. Pulling his focus inward, Lon blocked out all external noises and started a breathing exercise. In through his nose, released slowly through his mouth. Inhale, like a gentle wave. Exhale, washing away anxiety and negative energy. "Lon," said Lucia, "just give me a minute." Lon continued his breathing, and the malevolent noise of the crowd receded and resolved into separate conversations of those closest to him. "Seen nothing like it," said a voice nearby. He opened his eyes and turned. A younger man, likely his own age, a scar through his left eyebrow and a diode line installed in the skin above his right, talked to a small group nearby. "Like a giant ice cream scoop took a chunk out of..." The man's voice grew indistinct as he turned toward some of his companions. "Can you do eavesdrop mode on the group in front of me?" asked Lon. The man's voice echoed through Lon's ear cuff, tinny, peppered with artifacts, consequences of the audio process. "It's weird." The cluster of a half-dozen people had turned from the building to a small huddle as they discussed the strange event. Worried they'd notice his eavesdropping, Lon stared over the group's head at the top of the building. "Is weird the technical term for the blast pattern?" interjected a short woman next to the man with the scar. As the others laughed, Lon wondered how odd it was. He thought of those his same height as short. From his point of view, shouldn't his own height be the baseline? But then, if it was, almost everyone would be tall. "Oh, shut it," groused Scarbrow, his diode implant glowing a soft cyan to indicate humor. Lon never understood wearing your emotions on your face. "Did anyone get hurt?" the woman asked aloud. Silence for a moment. Lon could see several people in the group with proxy earpieces sub-vocalizing in a race to get the answer. 70 people died, a woman said somberly, but with the smug authority of someone whose AI gets the information quickest. "And even more got injured." "Knights," swore a large man. "Do they know what caused the explosion?" "They don't have a clue," piped up Scarbrow with renewed enthusiasm, eyes blinking rapidly, diode shifting to orange. "They assume it was some kind of industrial accident, but I tell you, something weird happened. I mean, where's all the—" "But if it's an accident," said the larger man, "why is DTS here? Don't they only come to the site of an explosion if it was a terrorist attack?" Lon drew a sharp breath. He hadn't considered there would be government agents at the site. "No," responded the redhead. "DTS always investigates a large explosion of unknown causes." Lon stepped away from the group, his heart racing. The large crowd was bad enough, but DTS was on site? "Told you it's worse," Lucia said. "The Department of Technology Security is here." Lon turned away from the building, breathing heavily. "Okay, Mr. Mind," Lucia continued. "What's the plan? How do we keep from getting caught by the fuzz and jailed for 1,000,000 years? He shouldn't have come. Logically, normal civilians have nothing to fear from DTS, and except for the thing with Lucia, Lon shouldn't fear them either. But everyone knew, you stay out of their way, you don't draw their eye. Lon hesitated, balanced on the knife's edge of indecision between conflicting desires. He wanted to take the bus home, curl up in bed, and forget the entire day. But that would mean giving up. He wouldn't learn anything about the visions he'd had that morning, incidents that were very different than anything he'd previously experienced, and somehow magically tied to an industrial accident miles away. "I don't know what to do," Lon said. "We can't get anywhere near an agent. Their proxies are government grade, much more powerful, and would probably detect you." "I could totally take them." "What? You could take government proxies? Are you kidding?" "Yeah," Lucia laughed, "'cause bragging is fun. I would be obliterated in nanoseconds. But you know me, I'm a hider, not a fighter." "So what then? Let's go home." "I can't," as much as he wanted to. "Okay, let's stay here." "How?" "Okay, let's do both. Split yourself in two." Lon sighed. "Or," said Lucia, "we could just split up. I separate from the cuff and go into lockdown mode. You hide the cuff, just in case. You'd be on your own until you get home and trigger the unlock from your terminal." Lon hesitated. Walking away from the crowd, he moved to a strip of grass at the edge of the parking lot and thumped to the ground under a cottonwood tree. It had been almost a year since the AI Lucia had secretly saved the world and started pretending to be his proxy. In that time, Lon had grown very used to having her there, especially as he struggled through social situations. Lon looked at the crowd, then at the building, then closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. "I feel trapped, cut off from where I really need to go. I know I'm being overly dramatic, but that crowd is like a deadly chasm. If I attempt to cross, I die." He could almost see it. His imagination took over, and the metaphor for his emotions took shape. He is trapped, locked in an old, abandoned warehouse. Ancient beige paint decorates the walls, cracked and peeling. Dust and old tools lay about like bits of driftwood on the beach. The only way out is through a window on the 3rd floor. The view through the window reveals a neighboring building, likely an equally old and abandoned factory, separated by an alley. The gap between buildings is unpassable. A deadly 10-meter drop to the ground below, the other structure 5 or 6 meters away. So close, yet it might as well be a different world. A short siren chirp jerked Lon from his daydream, and he looked up to see an emergency vehicle pulling into the opposite side of the parking lot. A second chirp from the vehicle encouraged the crowd to part and led it through an opening in the police barricades. As the uniformed officers pulled the barricades back into place, Lon realized with a start that the people were taking their time to fill back into the gap. Lon stared at the opening in the crowd. "What?" asked Lucia. Lon stood. "The crowd. There's a gap." He blinked, and his imagination took off again. A way free of the warehouse is revealed, a bridge to cross the gap between buildings. It will be difficult and dangerous. If anything goes wrong, he could fall to his death. It requires a leap of faith. "Go, Robin, go!" said Lucia. Lon hesitated for only a moment. He needed to know. He pulled the ear cuff from his ear just as a tone indicated Lucia had disconnected, then tucked it in a knothole in the cottonwood tree. He took off running across the parking lot toward the gap. As he approached the crowd, he sucked in a huge gulp of air, held it, and hurried forward, dodging just in time through the closing gap between people. As he came to a stop in front of the police barricade, his breath escaped from him in a rush, and it took him a moment before he could process the scene in front of him. The barricades kept the crowds to the back half of the parking lot, farthest from the building. Between the barricades and the Ranelagi building, the parking lot was a disturbed anthill of activity, crowded with emergency vehicles, temporary command structures, and an army of personnel. Police drones hovered above the crowd and swooped around the building. News crews, with their own drones at a safe distance, interviewed various official-looking people. Holographic projectors on tripods at regular intervals along the police barricades warned the onlookers to stay back and stay safe, words and warning symbols in English and Japanese rotating in the air. But Lon's attention quickly moved on. Much closer than he expected, the damaged Ranelagi building bore down on him, like a wounded mountain giant seeking retribution for its injury. At only 5 stories, the office was not a sizable skyscraper like the headquarters of the company he worked for, Criterion, but it was a similar modern design. The outer walls were mostly steel beams and glass, with the top floors in an asymmetrical shape, solar panels attached at various angles. The upper floors were topped with roof gardens, occasional vines, and other plants drooping over the edges. But even at 5 stories, the structure towered over him. Or maybe it was the weighty nature of the scene. Something unimaginably horrible had happened. People had died, and a massive chunk was gone from the upper left corner, exposing the internals of the first 4 floors. Lon tried to take a deep breath through his nose, but choked, the odors of batteries and plasma overwhelming him. Immediately, he wished he still had Lucia in his ear, or Tia or Maddox there with him, someone to help him process everything. It was real. Looking at photographs and video from news articles was not the same. Being there with the sights, smells, and sounds, standing below the building, towering over him, staring into its mortal wound, he couldn't deny it or explain it away. It was exactly what he'd seen from his apartment kitchen, miles away. It was all real. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to get more chapters. Splinter's Edge comes out on March 15th and is available to order now on Amazon.